Hello guys, tonight we're stepping gently into the cold shadows of history. Let your eyes grow heavy and your mind settle as we drift into a quiet, snow-covered memory of the 20th century. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is. Is it late in the evening or early in the dawn's stillness? Please leave a comment below. I'm genuinely curious to know where in the world we're falling asleep together tonight. Now get cozy. Pull the blankets around you like a warm shawl. Let your body become still. You're safe. You're warm. And now, gently close your eyes as I guide you far away from your present world. Let's begin. The cold does not greet you like an enemy. It simply is. It wraps around you with indifference, settling into the folds of your coat, the cracks of your boots, the corners of your lungs. You climb down from the truck with numb legs, ankles aching from the rattling ride. Ahead, the gates of the camp stand uneven and skeletal, made of crude timber logs and rusting iron. A painted sign above reads Corrective Labour Camp number 47, though some of the letters have flaked off. The name is meaningless. This is just one of hundreds. Some men step forward to line you up, trustees, prisoners themselves, wearing the same quilted uniforms, but with red armbands stitched roughly with Cyrillic letters. Nadzor. They yell like guards, but their voices crack with fear and cold. You are marched into a long, narrow barracks, with low ceilings and walls that breathe frost. There is no insulation. The bunks are stacked 3 high, made of raw pine boards, stained from decades of damp and despair. You are told to find a place and not to speak unless spoken to. Someone has already taken the lower bunks, older men who've been here for years, and don't even look up when you arrive. You climb to the top, the wood creaking under your weight. There is a thin blanket already stiff with frost. You are told you'll be woken at 5, that you'll work outside, that it will be hard. Someone mutters something about timber quotas, and a voice laughs hollowly. Someone else vomits quietly into a corner bucket. You do not sleep. The next morning comes not with a bell or a whistle, but with the banging of boots on wood. You're shoved awake before your mind has even realised it was asleep. The barracks smell of urine, damp wood, and something faintly metallic. You rub your face with icy fingers and follow the line of men out into the snow. The guards stand by the gate, holding rifles with long bayonets. They do not shout. They don't have to. Fear is already there, coiled inside your stomach. A chunk of bread is thrown into your hand. It's frozen hard and filled with sawdust. You chew until your jaw aches. Some receive watery soup, balanda, made from cabbage, fish heads, and warm brine. It scalds your throat going down and leaves you no warmer. Your first assignment is felling trees. The forest stretches out endlessly to the north, dark against the white sky. The camp's sawmill is primitive, the axe is dull, the saws rusted. You're paired with a man named Fedor who doesn't speak at first. He simply hands you a saw and motions toward a pine that stands 50 feet high and sways in the wind like a dying giant. You begin to work, pulling the teeth of the saw back and forth, your hands blistering beneath thin wool gloves. Fedor finally speaks at midday, when your arms are shaking and your breath comes in ragged clouds. He says, they'll check our quota at sundown. If we don't meet it, they'll take dinner. If we miss it twice, punishment. He says no more. The tree falls by late afternoon. You feel no pride, only cold. You drag the trunk back with Fedor stumbling in the snow. Your knees are soaked through, your fingers cracked and bleeding. Back in camp there is roll call again. You stand still for an hour as the guards read off names. One man is missing. No one says anything. You hear a gunshot later in the dark beyond the fence. No one mentions it. At dinner, the balanda is thinner. You eat in silence. You are given no extra blanket, no fire, only silence and the sound of wind outside. Your bunk is damp. You dream that night of home. Your street, the sound of a tram bell, the clink of teacups. When you wake, your pillow is stiff with frozen breath. There are no letters, no visits, no news, only snow, only numbers, and the next day begins the same. By the 3rd day, your body has already started to change. The joints in your hands no longer bend fully, and the skin on your knuckles has cracked into thin red lines that sting with every movement. Your back, sore from the thin bunk, throbs constantly now. You've begun to understand the rhythm of the camp, though rhythm may be too generous a word. It's more like a repetition of blunt impacts: wake, line up, march, work, stand still, eat, lie down, repeat. Each segment bleeds into the next with only minor variations, shifting guards, different trees, deeper snow. There is no calendar, no weekend, no end. You learn quickly that in the Gulag, survival is not just about strength. It's about learning what not to do. You don't speak during roll call, not even in a whisper. You don't ask for anything from the guards. You don't stare too long at the overseers. You don't complain about food or tools. You don't volunteer. You also learn to work just fast enough to meet quota, but not fast enough to be noticed. The men call it doing the snail. If you work too quickly, they'll raise your quota. If you work too slowly, you'll be punished. So you do just enough. Always just enough. But even that becomes harder by the hour. Your assigned brigade is made up of 12 men. Some are hardened criminals, Blatnai, who have lived in camps for years and carry themselves like kings of mud. Others are politicals like you, accused of some abstract betrayal against the state. One man in your team was a university professor, you learn. Another had been a streetcar conductor. One had been a military officer, though he never speaks and his left eye is clouded over from a beating. The criminals run the show within the barracks. They get the warmest bunks, the first bowls of soup. They don't work as hard, and the guards rarely discipline them. The politicals, they say, are cowards, traitors, weaklings. You have to bribe your way into space near the stove, even if it means giving away half your bread. Bread is the true currency here. Your daily ration is 600 grams if you meet your work norm. About a pound of black rye, dense as clay. Miss your norm, and it drops to 400 grams. Fall short again, and it goes down to 200 grams, barely a handful. At that level, you are what the others call a dokhodyaga, a walking corpse. No one helps you once you fall that far. The guards don't stop you from dying, and the prisoners don't share. Everyone remembers someone who starved on 200 grams a day. They always start to move slower, then forget to line up. Soon, they sleep through work or collapse while lifting logs. Then they vanish. Carried out behind the barracks at night, buried in snow or tossed into shallow mass graves beneath the pines. You feel hunger as a kind of companion now. At first, it was a sharp ache in your stomach, but now it's moved up into your chest and brain. It's a fog that makes your thoughts slower, your reactions duller. You've begun to dream of food, but not lavish meals, just the small things. A slice of salted cucumber, a spoonful of kasha, the smell of baked apples in your mother's kitchen. These thoughts hurt more than the hunger itself, so you try to push them out, but they always return. Everyone dreams of food in the Gulag. The tools you use are broken. The axes have loose heads, the saws are pitted with rust, your gloves have holes in the palms and you've had to wrap them with scraps of cloth taken from the edge of your blanket. The boots are worst of all, standard issue, oversized felt-lined things that are barely stitched together. When they get wet, they freeze, and you have to spend hours each night by the stove, trying to thaw them before morning. One man failed to dry his boots last week. He lost 2 toes before the next shift. The camp medic wrapped them in rags and told him to get back to work. The guards don't speak much. They wear heavy fur coats with tall hats and carry bolt-action rifles. Most are young, barely older than you, but they speak with the authority of men who know no one will question them. Some of them joke, some beat prisoners at random. Others are silent, tired of it all, perhaps trapped in their own version of this frozen cage. But even the kind ones don't help. Their kindness is usually just the absence of cruelty. You notice your face in a broken shard of mirror one day near the latrine. You almost don't recognize yourself. Your skin has gone pale grey, the lines around your mouth deeper. Your eyes seem sunken, older. There's a crust of ice in your beard, and your lips are cracked from cold and salt. You look like someone who has already begun to leave the world. On the 10th day, Fedor falls while carrying a log. His leg is twisted underneath him and he groans. You move to help him, but a guard shouts and the other men ignore him. He's pulled up, limping, and told to finish the shift or lose his ration. That night, he eats half his bread and gives the rest to you. You try to refuse, but he insists, Tomorrow I can't work. No quota, no bread, no point. His voice is quiet, not bitter, just flat, as though he's reciting something already decided. You understand then that death doesn't come here with ceremony. It comes quietly, through calculations. Miss your quota, miss your ration, miss your strength. Then you miss roll call, and someone else takes your bunk. It has snowed for 7 days without stopping. The forest grows darker with each passing hour. Somewhere, not far, you hear wolves at night. The guards laugh when they howl, but the rest of you grow still. You begin to see them in your dreams, circling the camp, waiting. You wake in the dark more often now, and when you do, you lie still, listening for the sound of boots or gunshots or breath that stops beside you. You have been in the camp less than 2 weeks. It already feels like another life. By now, you've learned to read the camp in silence. The subtle expressions on a fellow inmate's face, the rhythm of footsteps approaching in the snow, the way the wind shifts before a storm, all of it becomes a language, crude but essential. You've learned the difference between a guard's bored glance and a dangerous one, between the casual cruelty of a trustee and the practiced violence of an officer. These distinctions can mean everything, because in the Gulag, punishment is not only routine, it is methodical. There is a structure to discipline here, as intricate in its own way as a legal code, though it is unwritten and capricious. You see it in motion one morning, when a man in your brigade, Victor, speaks too loudly while working. It is not a shout, not even an argument, just frustration over a broken axe, expressed in a few sharp syllables. The overseer doesn't respond right away. He watches quietly until the day ends. Then, during evening roll call, Victor is pulled out of line without a word. He is taken to a low, windowless structure the men called the isolator. The isolator is punishment in its purest form. It is a wooden shack with no heat, barely large enough to lie down in, sealed tight against all warmth. Inside, men are stripped to their underclothes and left to endure the sub-zero temperatures. They are given half rations, sometimes less. After 3 days, they often crawl out unable to walk. Sometimes, they do not crawl out at all. Victor returns on the 4th day, carried by 2 other prisoners, his lips blackened with frostbite. He does not speak. His fingers are wrapped in cloth soaked with iodine. 2 of them have already turned grey. You say nothing. You help him into his bunk and give him half your bread without ceremony. He nods once, that's all. No words. The next day he disappears. You begin to notice the patterns. Men pulled out of line, entire barracks punished, when one man is caught hiding scraps of food. Once, a prisoner in another brigade tries to run. The guards catch him within hours. He had made it barely 2 kilometres through the deep snow. They do not shoot him, that would be too clean. Instead, they strip him to his shirt and tie him to a post outside the gates. He stands there until evening, unmoving. You see his shape through the fence as you line up for soup, his arms bound above his head. By morning he is gone. No one says his name. No one asks. Flogging is rare, but not unheard of. The guards prefer colder punishments, quieter ones, reduced rations, extra shifts, assignment to the latrine pits in the dead of night. The latrine duty is infamous, not for its filth, which is considerable, but for its exposure. No walls, no cover, just a wooden seat over a trench, out in the open. Men are sent there as punishment, often without coats. Many don't return. There is no escape from this logic. Even sickness is punished. You've seen what happens when someone tries to report fever or pain. The camp has a small infirmary, really just another barrack with wooden planks and a few tins of ointment. The doctor is a prisoner, an actual physician, but he has no tools. A cough earns you aspirin, a broken rib earns you a grim look and an order to keep working. There is no mercy, only quotas. Your own body has begun to falter. You've developed a cough that rattles deep in your chest. Your boots are soaked through again, and the skin on your feet is pale and peeling. You know you should ask to see the medic, but you don't. Not yet. If they pull you from work, you'll lose your ration. And if you lose your ration, you'll lose your strength. And if you lose your strength, you will fall into the same slow spiral that has already taken so many. You remember one man, his name was Artyom, who worked in your brigade. He had been a writer, he said, though his fingers were too stiff now to even hold a pencil. When he first arrived, he spoke often, too often. Quoted poetry, told stories from before the revolution. He was curious, questioning. He wanted to understand how the system worked, but understanding did not help him. In fact, It marked him. The guards noticed. The criminals mocked him. He grew quieter each day. Then, one morning, he did not rise from his bunk. He lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. He was still breathing, but he did not speak, did not eat. By the third day, he was carried out. Some said he'd starved himself on purpose. Others said he had simply let go. You think of Artyom often now, not because you were close, but because he reminds you of something you are beginning to forget. That you were once someone else. You had a name, a job, a street where people knew your face. Now, you are a number, a pair of eyes in a frost-bitten face, a body moving through snow. Still, you hold on. Not to hope. Hope is dangerous. But to habit, to routine. You learn to chew your bread slowly, to let it soften on your tongue. You save the warmest part of your soup for the last spoonful. You rub your fingers at night to keep circulation. You boil snow for water, strain it through cloth. You keep a small piece of cloth from home, hidden in your boot, though it smells now of mildew and sweat. And always, always, you count the days, even when no one else does. You carve notches into the underside of your bunk with a nail. You don't know if it will help, but it is something, a way of saying, I am still here, I still see, I still know what time is, even if time here has no meaning. There is a strange irony in how precise the quotas are in a place so otherwise shaped by chaos. Each morning a number is read out by a foreman, 5 cubic meters, 6 trees, 20 logs. The numbers vary, but the message is always the same. If you do not meet this quota, you will not eat. You will be listed as non-fulfilling. And a non-fulfilling prisoner is marked in the daily reports. Those reports go to men who sit in heated offices hundreds of kilometers away. They will never see your face, but their ink can kill you. The forest becomes your only measure of time. Days are counted not by dates or seasons, but by how many trees you fell, how many logs you carry. The calendar that once lived in your mind, birthdays, New Year's, holidays, disintegrates. Now you think in terms of the day the snow rose to your knees, or the day 3 men collapsed and didn't get up, or the day the soup had a single potato chunk, and you tasted sweetness for the first time in weeks. You learn the terrain like a hunted animal. The paths through the timber yard, the location of the small fire pits near the saw sheds, the slope where snowmelt gathers before it freezes again into treacherous ice. You know where the guards cut corners, which overseers will let you rest a moment if no one is looking, which trustees take bribes, and which strike without warning. Each day you are assigned to a brigade, usually the same men but not always. The strongest are sent deeper into the woods where trees are thicker, frost sharper and wind stronger. You're not strong enough anymore to join that group. You've lost weight. You no longer have the bulk to move logs quickly or carry more than a single pole at a time. That weakness puts you closer to the edge, closer to that dangerous category, dokodyaga. No one wants to be seen near them. They are contagious in a way, a reminder of what's coming. One of them, his name might have been Leonid, tries to stay on his feet by sheer force of will. You see him dragging his legs across the icy clearing, logs slipping from his thin arms. The guards laugh, but not cruelly, just amused, as if watching a stubborn mule. Later that day he collapses in the middle of the trail. A guard nudges him with the butt of his rifle. When Leonid doesn't respond, the guard spits and walks away. The logs are picked up by someone else. By nightfall, no one speaks of him again. Food is the only desire that cuts through the numbness. When the bread is handed out, every hand is ready. You notice how some men tear their piece apart and eat it in tiny bites. Others inhale it all in one desperate moment. The soup varies. Sometimes it's no more than cabbage water. Sometimes a spoon of barley floats on the surface. Meat is a myth. Once you think you taste a sliver of fish, your hands tremble afterwards. The cook is a silent man. Former chef in a Moscow hotel, they say. His hands shake now when he lifts the ladle. You wonder what he did to end up here. He never speaks unless asked. You never ask. Time becomes fragmented. The cold stretches minutes into eternities, while exhaustion folds hours into single blinks. You lose track of the days, then the weeks. Your notches on the underside of the bunk remain, but they feel meaningless now. You dream in fragments, of light, of warmth, of water. When you wake, the darkness feels heavier than before. It has a weight that settles on your chest. Sometimes it's hard to tell if your eyes are open or closed. Your skin begins to feel less like your own. Your fingertips turn pale blue. You wrap them in torn cloth, but it does little. The cracks grow deeper. One night, you wake to find blood on your blanket. Not much, just a smear, but it frightens you more than anything has in weeks. Still, you go on. There is no alternative. You rise each morning before the horn. You force your body through the motions of dressing, lining up, shuffling out into the dark. You listen for names called in roll call, praying not to hear your own, because sometimes being called out means transfer. Other times, it means the mines. The mines are worse than the forest, fewer return. No one is ever promoted from the mines. You meet a man named Isaac, who speaks little and always works with his head down. He shows you how to wrap your feet in strips of paper when your socks are wet. He gives you a piece of his bread once, for no reason. When you ask him why, he shrugs. "I don't need as much," he says. "My stomach's smaller now." You laugh at the absurdity of it. He smiles for a second. The next week, he is sent to a different camp section, and you never see him again. There is a funeral of sorts one afternoon. A man dies of pneumonia in the barracks. The guards allow his comrades to carry him to the edge of the woods. A pit is dug, shallow and frozen. There is no priest, no ceremony. A few men stand still while the body is lowered in. One of them mutters something, maybe a prayer, maybe just a name. The earth is frozen so hard that it doesn't cover the body completely. Snow does that overnight. You begin to understand that here survival is not a matter of faith or courage. It's a matter of minutes. You survive minute to minute, meal to meal, step to step. The broader picture, the injustice, the politics, the war, the ideology, it becomes hazy, irrelevant. You no longer wonder why you were sent here. You only wonder if you will make it through the next day. And yet, in this bleak, regulated horror, small moments still break through. A guard looking away when your hands fail, a bird landing on the woodpile, its feathers glowing bright against the white, a joke whispered across the soup line that makes someone snort and then cough, and then smile. These flickers don't last, but they remind you you're not yet gone. Not yet. There is no war here, not in the traditional sense. No guns cracking through forest lines, no marching boots or trenches. Yet still, you begin to sense the outlines of a battle. Quiet, slow-moving, fought not with weapons but with will. It is the war between man and the system that seeks to erase him. It is the battle to remain a self, rather than a number, a shadow, a husk. You feel this war in your limbs when you rise before dawn, muscles leaden, lungs aching. The cold presses on your ribs like iron weights. Your boots are stiff with yesterday's ice, your breath thin, your chest a hollow drum echoing with the echo of coughs all around you. Still, you rise, you dress, you stand in line, you march out with the others, each step a betrayal of the part of you that wants to stay down and vanish. The guards are less visible now, and more dangerous for it. Winter has deepened, and even they prefer to huddle in makeshift cabins, emerging only for inspections, punishments, and warnings. In their absence, the hierarchy of prisoners asserts itself more fully. The Urki, the professional criminals, have become kings of the barracks. They take the best bunks, the thickest coats, and the largest portions of bread. They enforce their own rules, and you know better than to cross them. They do not speak much, these Urki, but their eyes scan constantly. They detect weakness the way wolves do. One man, a teacher from Kiev, speaks out when his coat is stolen by a criminal named Kolya. The teacher is soft-spoken, proud, not yet broken in the way most of you are. That night you hear a scuffle outside the barrack, muffled and short. The next morning the teacher is gone. No one asks. You learn that silence is safer than justice, that dignity must be disguised as indifference. You begin to avoid eye contact, you grow skilled at seeming smaller, quieter. You learn to disappear in plain sight. Your body shifts too. You're thinner than you've ever been, bones showing at the shoulder and hip. Your skin is pale, tight, and always dry. The frost has taken one toe already, just the tip, but you wrapped it in rags and said nothing. The medic would only report you, and a report means a mark, and a mark can mean death. Better to bind it and limp. Every day is a new layer of endurance. The work is endless. The quotas never drop. When a man dies, his number is reassigned before his body has cooled. There is no shortage of prisoners to fill the ranks. New faces arrive weekly, marched in with the same hollow eyes and bundled coats. You look at them not with sympathy but with calculation. Will he survive? Will she fall within the month? It becomes instinct. Some don't wait. Suicide is rare, but it happens. One man walks into the river fully clothed in the dead of night. His body is found downstream days later. Another hurls himself into a pit at the timber mill, broken limbs twisted like thread. The guards react with boredom or annoyance. Paperwork must be filed. Numbers must be adjusted. You are warned not to waste the state's resources. But the deeper war is quieter still. It happens in minds, not bodies. You see it in the way a man stares at his bread without eating, in the way someone lies in bed, long after morning horn, not asleep, just done. It's not always dramatic. Often it's barely perceptible. But you've seen it enough times now. When the light leaves someone's eyes here, it doesn't come back. You cling to scraps of thought, fragments of the world beyond this place. You replay conversations you had before your arrest, your mother's voice at dinner, a friend's laugh at a train station. You try to remember the smell of soap, the warmth of summer wind on skin. But memories fade quickly in the Gulag. They blur at the edges, then shrink, then vanish. Even the names of people you loved begin to feel foreign in your mouth. One night an old man begins humming in the bunk beside you. A melody, slow and minor, something folkish. You don't know the song, but something about it breaks the weight of silence in the barrack. For a moment everyone is still. Just the hum, like a ghost drifting above the straw mattresses and frost-covered walls. He hums for a full minute, then stops. No one says anything. No one asks him to repeat it. But in your mind, the tune lingers for hours. That's how resistance looks here. A melody hummed. A piece of bread shared without a word. A story whispered under breath. They are not grand gestures. They do not overthrow empires. But in a world bent on stripping you of selfhood, they are victories nonetheless. There is a man, Petrov, who collects paper. It's a secret, absurd hobby. Any scrap, packaging, labels, torn notebook pages, he folds and hides in a cloth under his mattress. Once, in the latrine, he tells you why. One day, he says, I'll write again. He was a clerk, you learn, a bureaucrat, imprisoned for misreporting inventory. Not even theft, he says, just bad math. But he speaks of writing the way men speak of escape. Another time, you find a stone in the forest, shaped almost like a face. You hide it in your coat. You don't know why. It's not beautiful, but it's yours. You carry it with you for weeks. Spring threatens at the horizon, not warmth. No, that will come much later. But the snow begins to soften, and daylight lengthens by minutes. The earth beneath the barracks begins to thaw, and with it comes mud, rot, and the stench of months-long filth. But it also brings change. Men who have survived winter grow suddenly sharper, more aware. They begin to speak again, slowly. Jokes reappear. Plans are whispered in corners. There is talk of transfers, of new brigades, of prisoners who might be released early. No one truly believes it, but the idea lives, and in this place an idea is a dangerous thing. You think again of Isaac, who gave you bread. You think of the old man's melody. You think of the stone in your coat. These are your weapons in the silent war. They won't win it, but they keep you from surrendering fully. And in the Gulag, that is everything. By now you speak the Gulag's own dialect, a tongue not of words but of glances, silences, rhythms of movement. The language is learned not in lessons but through bruises, missing bread rations, and long stares at the ceiling in the darkest hours before morning horn. A nod from a guard could mean anything. A grunt from a fellow prisoner might mean, pass the bucket, or you took my spot, or I'm dying. You learn to translate quickly, accurately, or risk the consequences. You're not alone in this silent mastery. The older prisoners, the stariki as they're called, have become fluent over the years. Some of them have been here since the 30s. You look at them with a kind of hollow reverence. Not admiration, not quite envy, just awe at how their bodies still move, how they've bent but not broken. Their faces are parchment thin and deeply lined. Some have long since stopped speaking altogether, yet they communicate more than anyone with a single look. There's one among them, Alexander Ivanovich, whom you watch carefully. He walks with a limp, drags one foot, but still moves faster than most. They say he once translated German for the foreign ministry. Now he hauls timber. He does not talk much, but you notice he never returns to camp empty-handed. A pine knot, a rusty bolt, a sliver of salt pork filched from the kitchen. He always has something. You wonder how many years he's added to his life with these tiny victories. He speaks to you once, after weeks of silence, not to offer comfort or advice, but to correct the way you're stacking logs on a sled. Like that, you'll bruise the bark, bad for the tally, bad for the quota. You want to live another week, yes? You nod. He adjusts the logs with movements so swift and silent it's like watching a magician. Then he walks off. You don't forget the motion. The next day your tally is higher. You eat the full ration. You owe him and he never brings it up again. That's how things work here. Lessons are given without acknowledgement, favours without thanks. Debts are rarely spoken aloud but never forgotten. Your body is something else now. You are not sure you would recognise yourself if you were to look in a mirror, which, of course, you haven't seen in months. Your hands are gnarled and thickened. Your back aches permanently. Your skin bears the colours of cold and malnutrition, blue knuckles, yellowed fingers, a dull grey sheen where frostbite once kissed you. Still, you function. The pain has become something like background music. You don't notice it unless it disappears. The barrack is louder now with spring approaching. The thaw has stirred the vermin, and lice are a constant plague. You scratch in your sleep. Everyone does. Sometimes the scratching turns to bleeding. No one flinches at the sight anymore. There is a rhythm even to this. Scratch, sigh, mutter, sleep, repeat. Once, during a rare quiet moment, you try to remember a poem. You can't recall the name, only a few lines, but you whisper them to yourself when no one is near. The words feel foreign in your mouth, like a forgotten language. You speak them slowly, almost reverently, surprised you still remember the cadence. You don't know if the poem matters anymore, but it reminds you that you once had the luxury to care about things like words. Letters come, but rarely. Some prisoners receive them monthly, others never at all. There's no pattern. Some guards read them aloud in mocking tones, others pass them silently, as if ashamed. You haven't received one in months. At first, you imagine the reasons: delays, censorship, fear back home. Eventually, you stop wondering. It's easier. You see a man open a letter one day and crumple without sound. He doesn't cry, doesn't scream, just folds down like a paper figure, the letter still in hand. Later you hear that his wife has remarried. Not a word of hatred in the letter, just the facts. He works slower the next day. The day after, slower still. By the end of the week, he is carried back from the forest by two others, barely breathing. He dies quietly in the night. His bunk is filled by morning. You stop hoping for letters after that. Hope is dangerous here. Hope exposes you. There are moments when your mind rebels, when the absurdity of it all rises in your throat like bile. Why are you here? For speaking the wrong words? For being born in the wrong province? For trusting the wrong friend? There are no answers, or perhaps there are too many. The questions themselves become useless, like trying to argue with fire. Sometimes, in the stillness before the guards return, you think about the outside world. You wonder what season it is there, whether the same clouds that drift above your barracks might be seen above a distant village where your sister once lived, whether anyone still says your name out loud. But you don't linger on these thoughts. You can't. The day's work waits. The logs don't move themselves. The foreman has a whistle that screams like a bird of prey, and when it sounds, you run, even if your legs no longer know how. One night, something strange happens. A shipment of boots arrives. Used, mismatched, but dry. A guard, uncharacteristically kind, allows you to choose a pair. You find one that fits better than your current pair, though the soles are worn through. Still, they're warm. You tie them tight and feel for the first time in weeks like you might be able to walk without pain. You want to smile. You don't. Later, in the bunk, a fellow prisoner points at your new boots. "Good luck," he mutters. You nod. He's asleep before you can say anything else. In the Gulag, kindness is rare, but superstition is strong. Some believe new boots mean a change of fate, good or bad, no one can say. You lie awake that night, one hand resting on the edge of your mattress, the other still curled from the day's work. The wind howls against the barrack walls like a voice too tired to speak words, and for a moment you almost forget where you are. Almost, Even in the depths of this frozen nightmare, life weaves itself in secret patterns, tiny gestures and coded signals that exist beneath the ever-watchful eyes of the guards. The prisoners develop a language of subtlety, of half-hidden meanings embedded in the smallest acts. A look exchanged during roll call, the way someone stacks logs, the slight hesitation before answering a question. Each can carry a message only the initiated can understand. One evening, as the long dusk settles into the barrack, you notice a man seated beside you, tracing faint lines in the frost on the wooden bench. His fingers move slowly, deliberately. When you glance down, you realize he is etching the shape of letters, a name perhaps, or a secret phrase. You catch his eye briefly, and he nods. No words are spoken, but you feel the weight of trust in that simple gesture. He is Pavel, a former schoolteacher who speaks softly and rarely. He survived a decade of interrogations and forced labor before arriving here. Pavel believes that the greatest weapon the state fears is memory, the ability to remember, to tell stories, to keep the past alive. He teaches you the shapes of letters, how to fold tiny messages in scraps of paper hidden inside your coat, how to pass them unnoticed in the shadow of the watchtower. Each message is a thread, fragile yet vital, linking prisoners scattered across the camps. They share news of transfers, warnings about new guards, lists of prisoners who have died or been sent to the mines. In the cold silence, these small notes become lifelines, a reminder that none of you are truly forgotten. But the stakes are immense. Discovery means severe punishment, often beatings or transfer to the punishment cells. Some never return from those dark places. The fear sharpens every move, every glance. You learn to read the language of silence as much as the coded words. Outside, the forest whispers with the breath of winter's end. The ice begins to crack beneath the snow, thin shards snapping like brittle glass underfoot. The cold lingers, but the sunlight stretches longer each day, painting the camp in pale gold before fading again to grey. The barracks feel more crowded now. New arrivals arrive daily, eyes wide with disbelief, bodies trembling with cold and exhaustion. They have not yet learned the language you and the others share. They move awkwardly, speak too loudly, trust too quickly. The older prisoners watch them with quiet pity. Your own body remains fragile. A persistent cough rattles your chest, the residue of pneumonia that never fully left. Each breath is a battle between hope and surrender. You avoid the medic when you can, knowing that a note in your file is almost a death sentence. Yet when the cough worsens, you accept a bitter tea made of pine needles and hope it dulls the pain. During work details, you notice a subtle shift in the guards' behaviour. Some seem more restless, glancing nervously toward the barracks, as if waiting for something unseen. Rumours spread in whispered circles about changes in Moscow, about new orders, about possible amnesties. None of it feels real, but the mere hint of change stirs something ancient inside you, a fragile spark of hope that could easily be snuffed out. One afternoon, as you haul logs through the mud and melting snow, you catch sight of a small bird, a sparrow, its feathers ruffled and dull against the bleak landscape. It flutters near the edge of the camp, pecking at frozen seeds buried beneath ice. You watch it for a moment, marvelling at its persistence. It has no idea of the cruelty surrounding it. It only knows it must survive, no matter the odds. That day, as you lay down on your bunk, you find yourself tracing letters in the condensation on the window. Your name, the names of those who have died, the names of those who still fight in silence. The shapes feel unfamiliar on your tongue, like a language you have almost forgotten, but desperately need to remember. In this place, where names become numbers and memories fade like smoke, you hold tightly to these hidden codes. They are the thread that connects the past to the present, life to death, and perhaps, one day, freedom to captivity. For now, they are all you have. Day after day, the work repeats with a brutal monotony, but each repetition carries its own weight, a unique strain on your body and mind. You wake before the first light, muscles stiff and trembling from cold and exhaustion, and trudge out with the others into the raw morning. The forest around you is a silent, endless sea of grey trunks, their branches bare against the heavy sky. Snow lingers in patches, melting slowly into mud that clings thick and cold to your boots. The task is always the same: fell trees, strip branches, cut logs, haul heavy loads across the frozen ground. The guards measure your labour in quotas, numbers that seem impossible, arbitrary, yet dictate your very survival. The chain gang moves in rhythm, but it is a cruel and broken one, disrupted by coughing fits, collapsing limbs, and the steady retreat of hope. You notice how the forest itself seems indifferent to the suffering. Pines rise tall and silent, the wind slipping through needles like whispers from a distant world. Birds are scarce this time of year, their songs silenced by winter's last grasp. You find a broken branch and press it between your palms, feeling the rough bark scrape your raw skin. It is the only living thing you can touch that doesn't demand anything of you. Hunger gnaws constantly at your belly, an ache that no ration can quite fill. The meagre bread, watery soup, and thin slices of salted fish are barely enough to keep the smallest flicker of strength alive. You've seen men eat pine needles, moss, even bark when desperation bites hardest. One prisoner, a young man barely older than a boy, collapses in the forest after trying to lift a heavy log. The guards drag him back to camp, where he never regains consciousness. The camp is a place where death is both sudden and slow. Some succumb quickly, frostbite, starvation, illness. Others linger, their bodies wasted, but their minds trapped in a fog of despair. You hear the quiet deaths in the night, soft and unnoticed, swallowed by the cold walls. Despite the bleakness, small acts of defiance persist. Prisoners share what little they have, an extra crust of bread, a patch of warmth near a stove, a whispered word of comfort. You witness a man secretly swapping his thin wool scarf for a better one stolen from a guard's locker. Another hides a small piece of chocolate, passing it in secret to a friend who has not eaten in days. These moments feel like fragile sparks in a dark forest, fleeting but precious. The work wears on your body relentlessly. Your hands blister and crack, the skin peeling away like dead leaves. Your feet ache with every step, bones bruised by the frozen ground. Your back, once strong, now bends slightly under the weight of years and labour. You catch yourself flinching at sudden noises, wary of punishments, always alert to the unpredictable violence simmering beneath the surface. At night, when the barrack falls into restless sleep, you hear the soft breathing of those around you, the scrape of boards settling in the cold, and sometimes the distant howl of wolves beyond the fence. The world outside feels impossibly far away, another lifetime, another reality. Yet, you hold on. You carry with you memories of sunlight on your face, the laughter of friends, the taste of warm bread. These are the invisible threads that tether you to your humanity, to the hope that perhaps one day this endless task will end, and you will step beyond the barbed wire and snowdrifts. Until then, you work, you survive, you endure. The forest watches, silent and eternal, as the years pass like shadows across the frozen earth. In the stillness of the barracks after the day's grueling labour, a heavy silence settles over the rows of bunks, like a dense fog. No one speaks, not because of fear alone, but because words feel too fragile, too dangerous to trust. The thin wooden walls seem to swallow every sound, and even a whisper could carry farther than intended. You lie awake beneath threadbare blankets, listening to the quiet rhythm of breathing, the occasional cough, and the faint creak of settling wood. The silence is thick, almost tangible, pressing down on your chest harder than the cold ever could. This silence has its own language. It tells stories of grief and loss, of hopelessness and faint sparks of resistance. It carries the weight of hundreds of names, those who came before and will never return. Names whispered under breath, carved into stolen pieces of wood, or etched in the memory of the few who still remember. It's a silence heavy with unspoken prayers and a mourning that has no place for tears. You think of how the silence is broken sometimes, in brief, almost imperceptible ways. The shifting of feet, a cough stifled quickly, the subtle exchange of a crust of bread passed hand to hand beneath the blankets. These moments are acts of defiance, small threads of life in a tapestry woven with suffering. Outside, the wind howls through the gaps in the barrack walls, carrying the bitter scent of pine and frozen earth. The sun, pale and distant, casts long shadows across the campyard, where footprints freeze in the mud and slowly vanish under fresh snow. You imagine what it must be like beyond the fences. Open skies, birdsong, the warmth of the sun on bare skin. But these thoughts are fleeting, fragile like the winter daylight itself. The guards rarely enter at night, but their presence is always felt, a shadow lurking just beyond the thin walls. Their boots echo in the distance, a reminder that the watchful eyes never sleep. Punishments for the smallest infractions come swiftly, A blow to the ribs, extra hours in the freezing yard, a night spent in the dark punishment cell. Fear is a constant companion, a silent guardian of order. Among the prisoners, conversations are scarce and cautious. Trust is a luxury none can afford. Yet in the hush you hear fragments of stories, snatches of life before the camp, memories of homes lost, families vanished, futures stolen. These stories surface in whispers, shared between those brave enough to risk the consequences. They are fragile bridges to a world long gone, a world you both crave and fear. In this oppressive quiet, you learn to listen closely, not just to sounds but to the spaces between them. You become attuned to the subtle changes in breath, the slight tremor of a hand, the unspoken message in a glance. It is a language forged in suffering, a testament to resilience hidden beneath layers of despair. You clutch these moments tightly, for they remind you that beneath the weight of silence, there remains a flicker of something vital. It is not hope, not yet, not the bright, defiant blaze of hope, but a quieter, more stubborn ember. The ember of survival, of memory, of a self that refuses to be extinguished, even here in the heart of darkness. As the days blur into weeks, the faces around you become both familiar and strangely distant. In this place where survival is a daily struggle, relationships form quickly, but are often shattered just as fast. Bonds forged in the fire of shared hardship are fragile, vulnerable to betrayal, exhaustion, and the overwhelming will to live at any cost. You learn that friendship here is a delicate dance, trust must be measured, kindness given cautiously, and loyalty weighed against self-preservation. You watch a man named Victor, whose fierce laughter once filled the barrack, slowly withdraw into himself. His eyes grow hollow as he grapples with news from home, letters that arrive torn or empty, whispers of family lost or forgotten. One night he disappears from the bunk without a word. The next morning his bed is cold and empty. Rumours swirl that he tried to escape or perhaps surrendered to despair. No one confirms. No one asks. Elsewhere, a woman named Leda clings to her few possessions, a threadbare scarf, a faded photograph. She shares stories in quiet moments about the city where she grew up, the smells of fresh bread and summer gardens. You feel a strange kinship with her, a reminder of a life that once was, now buried beneath layers of snow and silence. Yet even she has moments of cold calculation, when survival demands a sharp edge beneath her gentle voice. In these fractured bonds, you find both solace and pain, small acts of compassion, a shared piece of bread, a whispered warning about a cruel guard, become lifelines in the vast sea of isolation. But betrayals cut deep. A stolen ration, a whispered denunciation, a look turned away in fear. These wounds leave scars no medicine can heal. You begin to understand the complex web that holds the prisoners together and tears them apart. It is woven from fear and hope, desperation and humanity, brutality and kindness in equal measure. Each person carries their own story, their own secret burden. Sometimes these stories collide, sometimes they coexist in uneasy silence. Your own story feels fragile, a thread stretched thin by exhaustion and cold. You wonder how much longer you can hold on, not just to life, but to yourself. The man you were before the camp seems like a distant memory, a shadow slipping through your fingers. Yet, amid this fractured world, moments of clarity shine through. A shared smile in the face of cruelty, a hand offered without expectation, a quiet refusal to surrender. These moments remind you that even here, beneath the weight of oppression, the human spirit endures. You carry these fractured bonds with you, like worn talismans against the cold. They are proof that even in the darkest places, connection can survive, fragile, imperfect, but real. In the barracks, names become precious commodities. They are not just identifiers, but anchors to identity, fragile reminders of the self beneath the prisoner number. Yet, the Soviet system strips many of their names, replacing them with numbers on metal tags, stamped on clothing, or simply lost to bureaucracy. You find yourself clinging to your own name in secret, whispering it in the dark, afraid it might slip away entirely. Some men have already lost their names. When you ask, the others only shrug or lower their eyes as if speaking a name aloud might summon a ghost. You notice that some prisoners refer to each other only by their first names, while others speak in hushed tones, using nicknames or coded phrases, preserving identity beneath layers of necessity. One day, a new prisoner arrives. Young, thin, eyes wide with disbelief. He carries a worn photograph tucked inside his coat, the edges curled and stained. The guards mock him, demanding he discard the useless paper, but the boy refuses. Later, you overhear him whispering names to himself, as if chanting a prayer. The names are those of family lost, a past erased, a future stolen. You watch him from the shadows, and realise that these names are his lifeline. Your own name feels heavier each day, a fragile thread you try to hold on to, amid the relentless tide of dehumanisation. You think of the letters you once wrote, of the voices that called you by this name before the camp swallowed your world. Sometimes, in moments of quiet, you repeat it over and over, tracing the sound as a balm against the erasure. The barracks are filled with whispered stories of names stolen by fear and cruelty. Some prisoners have been renamed by the guards as punishment or humiliation. Others have chosen new names, small acts of rebellion, to assert a sliver of control. You hear a man called White Bear because of his thick pale hair and quiet strength. Another is known only as Silent Ivan, for the way he speaks only when necessary. Each name carries a story, a fragment of life lived before the gates closed behind you. They are fragile resistances against the machinery of erasure. One night, you trace your own name on the rough wood of the bunk with a splinter, the letters shaky but deliberate. It is an act of quiet defiance, a claim to existence in a place designed to strip it away. The wood is cold and rough beneath your fingers, but the name feels warm, alive. In this world of shadows and silence, names are more than words. They are lifelines. They tether you to the person you once were, to the hope that one day you might be more than a prisoner number, more than a ghost in the endless winter. Amidst the bleak landscape of snow, mud, and endless barracks, there exists a place few prisoners speak of openly: a hidden garden. It is not a garden in the traditional sense, but a small, secret patch of earth behind the infirmary, where a handful of prisoners have quietly coaxed life from the frozen soil. The garden is a fragile oasis of green, a stubborn defiance against the harshness that surrounds it. You first hear about it from an older man named Yuri, whose hands are rough but gentle, scarred by years of labour and cold. He speaks softly, as if afraid the garden itself might be delicate enough to shatter if exposed to too many ears. Yuri tells you that he and a few others have been tending this small patch for months, planting what few seeds they could smuggle or find, a few roots, a handful of hardy herbs. The garden is hidden behind a low wall of stacked stones, mostly concealed by a thick tangle of dead branches and ice. To reach it, you must slip past the guards' patrols and the watchful eyes of informers, moving like ghosts through the camp's maze. When you arrive, the air feels different, stiller, almost warmer despite the biting cold. In this tiny patch, fragile shoots push through the frozen ground, pale green against the grey mud. The scent of earth, faint but unmistakable, rises like a whisper of another world. Yuri kneels carefully, tending the plants with worn hands, murmuring names and stories of gardens left behind in distant places, villages, cities, homes, erased by war and repression. For a moment you let yourself imagine the warmth of the sun on your skin, the taste of fresh herbs, the quiet peace of growth. The garden feels like a secret promise, a small rebellion rooted in hope. Here life refuses to surrender entirely. Yet the garden is also a place of risk. Discovery would mean brutal punishment, whippings, transfer to harsher camps, or worse. Each visit is a careful act of defiance, an assertion that even in this frozen wasteland, life can persist, however faintly. You help Yuri tend the soil, your fingers numb but careful. You plant a seed, small and trembling, and bury it beneath the cold earth. It is a tiny act, almost meaningless in the vast cruelty of the camp, but it feels like reclaiming a part of yourself. In this secret garden, hope grows quietly beneath the snow. The winter seems endless here, stretching across the landscape like a frozen, suffocating shroud that dulls even the brightest memories of warmth and life. Each morning you awaken to a world softened by snow but sharpened by cold, so cold it bites through layers of worn clothing, settling deep into your bones. The breath of the camp is a mist that clouds your vision, mingling with the smoke from distant fires and the faint scent of damp wood and frost. Outside, the sky is a pale slate, heavy with clouds that promise more snow, more weight, more silence. You move through the days almost as a shadow, your body aching from the relentless labour and the sharp sting of frostbite creeping into your fingers and toes. The cold steals little pieces of you every hour, skin cracking and bleeding, muscles tightening, limbs trembling with exhaustion. Even the warmth of the meagre barrack fire seems to vanish quickly, swallowed by the drafts and the chill that never fully lifts. Illness spreads quietly among the prisoners like a ghost. Pneumonia, scurvy and infections ravage bodies already starved of nutrients and rest. The camp's infirmary, a bleak room with cracked walls and a flickering stove, offers little comfort. Medicine is scarce and the medics are often overwhelmed or indifferent. You see men dragged away with fevered faces, their strength fading as the cold presses in tighter. Some disappear into the punishment barracks, never to return. Amid this struggle, the very fabric of human endurance frays. Men once strong and proud crumble under the weight of unrelenting suffering. Faces lose their colour, eyes grow dull, and voices become whispers, barely audible over the wind. You watch a friend, Nikolai, whose laughter once filled the barracks, wither day by day, his body bending toward the cold earth, like a dying tree. He tells you once, in a voice barely more than a rasp, that he dreams of warmth, of a fire that doesn't burn, of sunlight that lasts. The guards, hardened by their own brutal realities, grow more unpredictable as winter drags on. Some are harsher, their punishments more frequent and cruel, as if trying to wrest control from the overwhelming bleakness. Others seem indifferent, going through the motions with tired eyes. Occasionally you witness acts of unexpected cruelty, men beaten for the smallest perceived slight, denied even the thin ration of bread that sustains the rest. Fear coils tightly in the air, a constant companion that seeps into every corner of life. Yet amid this suffocating cold and despair, the human spirit clings stubbornly to life. You and others share whispers of old songs, faint echoes of laughter, stories of better days told quietly beneath blankets. These small acts of memory are like flickering candles in a vast darkness, fragile but unextinguished. You write messages on scraps of paper, hiding them in your coat or carving names into wood, trying to preserve something beyond mere survival. The cold also brings strange moments of clarity. In the frozen stillness, you feel the weight of your own existence more keenly, the beating of your heart, the slow rhythm of your breath, the ache of muscles and bones. The world narrows to these sensations, each moment a delicate balance between surrender and endurance. You find yourself staring through the frost-covered window at the bleak landscape outside. The endless rows of barracks, the barbed wire fences, the skeletal trees bent under the weight of snow. It is a landscape stripped bare, yet stubbornly alive in its own harsh way. You imagine that if you could step beyond the camp, beyond the fences and watchtowers, you might find the world waiting, still cold, still cruel, but breathing. For now, the long winter holds you tightly, an unyielding force shaping every day and night. It tests your body, your mind, your very soul. Yet, within this cold, you sense something quietly enduring, a thread of life that refuses to break, a silent promise that the seasons will turn again, and perhaps one day, so will your fate. Beneath the heavy oppression of the camp, where fear and despair seem to saturate every breath, there exists a quieter, less visible struggle, a whispered resistance. It does not roar or rise in open rebellion. Such acts are swiftly crushed, leaving no room for hope. Instead, resistance here takes subtler, more fragile forms. Glances exchanged, small acts of defiance, secret messages passed like fragile lifelines between prisoners. You begin to notice how the prisoners develop their own hidden language, a complex network of signs and gestures that carry warnings, encouragement, or coded information. In the dining hall, a certain way of tapping a spoon on the table signals danger or hope. A nod in the barrack means solidarity. A slight shake of the head means caution. These are the threads that weave an unseen tapestry of connection amid the brutal isolation. One evening, you witness a whispered conversation between two men, spoken in careful, hushed tones, about a plan to hide stolen supplies, a rare luxury that could mean the difference between life and death. Their faces are pale but determined, eyes sharp with a flicker of something that resembles hope. You sense that even in this desolation, some refuse to be entirely broken. The guards, though brutal and unpredictable, are not all alike. Some prisoners speak of a few who look the other way when small acts of resistance occur, or quietly ease punishments when they can. These moments are rare and fraught with risk, but they offer a glimmer of humanity in an otherwise dehumanizing system. You learn that music, too, has become a form of quiet rebellion. Snatches of old songs, hummed softly beneath breath, fill the barracks. The melodies are mournful, laden with memories of freedom and home, yet they carry a strength that defies the silence imposed by fear. One prisoner, a former musician, secretly crafts a crude instrument from scraps of wood and wire. When he plays, the notes are raw and imperfect, but they stir something deep inside those who listen. A fleeting reminder of beauty and life beyond these walls. There are also stories passed in whispers about distant uprisings, rumours of other camps where prisoners have resisted, where for a moment the chains of fear loosened. These stories travel slowly like embers on the wind, sometimes flickering brightly before fading into the cold reality of this place. But they are enough to remind you that resistance is possible even here. You find yourself drawn into this quiet network, small acts becoming your lifeline. You pass a note hidden in a coat lining, share a bit of extra food when you can, exchange encouraging words in the moments between labour. Each act is a fragile rebellion, a seed planted in frozen soil. The whispered resistance does not promise freedom or victory, but it offers something just as vital. A reclaiming of dignity, a refusal to be erased. In this harsh landscape of suffering and control, these small defiant acts form a hidden current, pulling you and others beneath the surface of despair. And so, amid the endless cold and watchful eyes, life continues in secret. The quiet defiance of the prisoners becomes a faint but persistent heartbeat beneath the silence, a reminder that even in the darkest places, the human spirit can find ways to resist and endure. The punishment barracks stand apart from the main camp like a shadow cast long and dark, a place whispered about with a mixture of fear and dread. Its walls are taller, thicker, stained with years of suffering, and the very ground around it seems harder, colder, as if the earth itself recoils from what happens within. Prisoners rarely return from there, and when they do, they are broken in ways that cannot be seen at first glance. You first hear about the punishment barracks in hushed tones, a warning passed like a cold breeze through the barracks. The Sharashka, some call it, a place for those who defy orders, speak out, or fail to meet impossible work quotas. Others simply disappear, swallowed by the silence of the camp, later revealed to have been sent there as punishment or re-education. To be sent to the punishment barracks is to be cast into a living nightmare within the nightmare of the camp itself. The cells are cramped and damp, barely warmed by the thin smoke of a stove that burns weakly through the freezing nights. The air is thick with the stench of sweat, sickness, and despair. Guards patrol with a cruelty sharpened by the knowledge that their prisoners are already broken, but still, they find new ways to inflict pain. You hear stories of prisoners forced to stand for hours in the freezing yard, naked to the biting wind, their bodies trembling uncontrollably, but forbidden to move. Others are kept in isolation, locked in dark cells so small that they can barely sit or lie down. Hunger in these cells is a punishment itself. Food is withheld or given in scraps too small to sustain life. Many do not survive the ordeal, their bodies wasted by cold, starvation, and neglect. Those who return carry a haunted look in their eyes, a silence so deep it seems to swallow the soul. Their bodies may still stand among the living, but their spirit is often broken beyond repair. You see the way they move, slowly, as if weighed down by invisible chains, and hear how their voices falter, if they speak at all. The threat of the punishment barracks looms over every prisoner like a spectre, shaping behaviour through fear. Even the smallest misstep can mean the difference between survival and utter destruction. The guards use it as a tool not just of punishment, but of control, crushing hope with the certainty of suffering. You find yourself measuring every word, every gesture, aware that any moment could tip the balance. The punishment barracks are a reminder that here in this frozen wasteland, cruelty is not only physical, but psychological. It is a dark heart beating at the centre of the camp, a place where humanity is stripped bare and the will to survive is tested beyond endurance. Yet even in the shadow of this terror, you notice the faintest flickers of resilience. A prisoner who survives the punishment barracks sometimes returns with a quiet strength, a hardened resolve that no longer fears death because it has already been embraced. In these rare survivors you glimpse the complex truth of survival in the Gulag, that sometimes to endure is itself an act of rebellion against the darkness. Within the labyrinth of the camp's fear and suffering, an invisible but ever-present force quietly shapes the lives of prisoners, the informers. These are men and women who, for a variety of reasons, choose or are coerced into betraying their fellow inmates. Their presence casts a long, insidious shadow, poisoning trust, and weaving a tangled web of suspicion that spreads through the barracks like a silent plague. You become acutely aware of the informers early on, not by overt acts but through the subtle shifts in atmosphere. A sudden harsh word from a comrade, a glance that flickers away too quickly, a whispered conversation abruptly ending when you approach. No one speaks openly about them, yet everyone knows they exist. It is this knowledge that forces prisoners into a constant state of vigilance, where even a careless phrase can be twisted into evidence of guilt. Some informers act out of desperation, fear for their own lives, promises of slightly better treatment, or the lure of food and warmth. Others betray with cold calculation, seeking favour with the guards or exacting personal vengeance. The reasons are as varied as the prisoners themselves, but the consequences ripple outward, fracturing the fragile bonds that sustain life here. You notice how the informer's presence transforms everyday interactions into acts of self-preservation. Conversations become guarded, jokes disappear, and silence grows heavier. People avoid sharing too much, fearing that even an innocent remark could be reported. This pervasive mistrust is as much a weapon of control as the guards' batons or the bitter cold. Occasionally you witness the fallout from betrayal. A prisoner is dragged from the barrack in the middle of the night, accused of planning escape or sabotage. The accusation often comes with no proof beyond the word of an informer. The man disappears, swallowed by the camp's merciless machinery. Those left behind shrink further into themselves, the thin thread of hope unravelling. You grapple with the complex emotions these informers evoke, a mixture of anger, pity and fear. Some prisoners, broken by despair or cruelty, become informers themselves, trapped in a vicious cycle of survival and betrayal. Others condemn them in silence, knowing that open accusation could mean death. Despite the poisonous effect of informers, small acts of solidarity persist. Prisoners learn to read subtle signs of trust, a slight touch on the arm, a shared look, a carefully chosen word. In these moments you feel the flicker of human connection, fighting against the pervasive betrayal. The presence of informers is a constant reminder of the camp's true power, not just the physical brutality, but the way it fractures the human spirit, turning victim against victim. It is a cruelty that runs deeper than any wound, corroding the very foundation of community. Yet amid this poisoned atmosphere, you cling to moments of cautious trust, recognizing that survival here depends not only on endurance of the body, but on the fragile resilience of the heart. Even in the darkest corners of the camp, the struggle to hold onto humanity persists, delicate and defiant against the tide of fear. After weeks of back-breaking labour in the timber yards and construction zones, a new order arrives: transport to the mines. The command comes abruptly, as if the camp itself breathes in new horrors to replace those already endured. The mines promise even harsher conditions, deeper cold, and a work that seems to consume not only the body but the soul. You join the long line of prisoners shuffled through the frozen corridors, bundled poorly against the biting wind, feet crunching on ice and gravel. The guards bark orders, pushing the group forward with little regard for those who stumble or collapse. The march to the mines is slow, grueling, a test of endurance that leaves many gasping for breath before they even arrive. The landscape around you is bleak. Grey skies stretch endlessly, the ground frozen and scarred by previous labour. Barbed wire fences snake into the distance, watchtowers silhouetted against the pale horizon. The mines themselves gape open like wounds in the earth, yawning black mouths from which the camp's prisoners are expected to extract its bitter wealth. You find yourself assigned to a group of men tasked with digging and hauling coal. The work is relentless, shoveling heavy loads from the mine face, transporting them across icy platforms, all while struggling to breathe the dust-choked air. The tunnels are narrow and dark, the walls slick with moisture and grime. Every breath is thick with coal dust that clings to your lungs, a slow poison you cannot escape. The danger is constant. Cave-ins are a whispered terror, sudden and deadly. Some men disappear without a trace, swallowed by the earth or crushed beneath falling rock. Others collapse from exhaustion, coughing up blood, their bodies failing under the weight of the unforgiving work. Your hands blister and crack, muscles ache with a dull, persistent pain. The cold gnaws at your fingers and toes, despite gloves and boots that are barely more than rags. Meals are scant and often cold, leaving you hollow and weak. The stench of sweat, coal dust and fear hangs heavy in the air. Despite the brutality, there is a grim rhythm to the work. The clatter of picks and shovels echoes through the tunnels, punctuated by the harsh voices of overseers. You learn to move with a mechanical precision, conserving energy where you can, avoiding the eyes of guards when punishment looms too close. You see men pushed beyond their limits, their bodies breaking under the strain. Some fall silently, never to rise again. Others fight the pull of despair with grim determination, clutching memories of home or the faint hope of freedom. The mines are a world apart from the barracks, a subterranean hell where time loses meaning and light is a forgotten dream. Each day underground chips away at your spirit, leaving you hollowed, a shadow of the person who entered. Yet even here, beneath layers of rock and suffering, life flickers stubbornly. Prisoners share whispered prayers, a comforting word, a steady hand. These small acts become lifelines, fragile threads holding you to humanity in a place designed to erase it. The long march to the mines is not just a physical journey, but a descent deeper into the camp's relentless grip, where survival demands every ounce of strength and every fragment of hope. The days in the mines stretch endlessly, each marked by the sharp sting of hunger gnawing at your insides like a persistent animal. Food here is not nourishment, but a bare thread that barely holds you above the abyss. The rations are meagre, cold, and repetitive. A thin, watery soup, a small piece of black bread dense with sawdust, and sometimes a handful of boiled cabbage or a single spoonful of porridge. You quickly learn to ration every crumb, to chew slowly and swallow carefully, as if conserving even the memory of food might keep you alive a moment longer. Hunger is a constant companion, its sharp pangs twisting your stomach and dulling your mind. It saps your strength and steals your focus, turning simple tasks into monumental struggles. The food lines move slowly, prisoners pushing and shoving for the smallest portions. Occasionally, a man will try to hide a scrap or smuggle away a spoonful, only to be caught and punished severely. Watching others eat stirs a mix of desperation and resignation within you, sometimes jealousy, often sorrow. Conversations around meals are rare and whispered. No one wants to talk too much on an empty stomach. Instead, eyes flicker toward anything edible. Leftover crumbs, scraps dropped on the floor, the bark of trees gathered surreptitiously during work. Some prisoners risk gathering frozen weeds or roots, chewing on bitter, tasteless plants in a desperate attempt to fill the void. You find yourself haunted by memories of food once taken for granted. A warm loaf, fresh from the oven, the smell of a kitchen bustling with life, the taste of sweet fruit that now feels like a distant dream. These memories sharpen the ache of hunger, a cruel reminder of what the camp has stolen. At night, the hunger twists into a dull ache, settling deep in your bones. It colours your dreams with phantom feasts that vanish upon waking, leaving a hollow emptiness. You learn to ignore it when you can, focusing on the rhythm of breathing, the warmth of shared blankets, the whispered words of those around you. The meagre rations serve not only to weaken the body, but to erode the will. The camp's design is cruelly efficient: starve the body, break the spirit. Yet within this harsh calculus, prisoners develop quiet strategies to survive. Pooling food, trading small favours, sharing what little they have. These acts of solidarity become lifelines amid the hunger. You realise that survival here is not just a matter of enduring labour or cold, but outwitting hunger itself, finding strength in scarcity, hope in the smallest crumbs, and connection in the shared suffering of starvation. The meagre rations shape the camp as much as the cold or the guards, carving deep grooves of pain and endurance into every day. As days blur into weeks and weeks into months, the physical hardships of the camp begin to intertwine with a deeper, more invisible torment: the psychological weight of imprisonment. It is not only the cold, the hunger, or the brutal labour that crushes you. It is the ceaseless uncertainty, the absence of any future beyond this frozen wasteland, the relentless grinding down of hope itself. You begin to notice how time warps in the camp. Hours stretch endlessly in the cold barracks, yet days slip away, unnoticed in the tunnels or the woodpile. Without the rhythms of normal life, without calendars or clocks, the past and future merge into a grey haze. Memories of freedom fade like distant echoes, and the thought of anything beyond these fences feels both impossible and unbearable. The guard shouts and the crack of whips occasionally pierce the monotony, reminding you of the constant threat looming over every moment. But between these bursts of violence, a heavier silence settles, an oppressive stillness where fear simmers beneath the surface, waiting to explode. You find your mind wandering, pulled toward both the past and the future, yet trapped in the present's harsh reality. Faces of loved ones haunt your thoughts, family left behind, letters never sent or received. You clutch to these fragile memories, as if they were lifelines, but they also deepen the ache of separation, a gnawing loneliness that no human presence can fully dispel. Conversations among prisoners often circle back to lost dreams, regrets, and the cruel irony of being condemned for crimes you did not commit, or for crimes fabricated by a merciless system. These talks are bittersweet, a mixture of shared pain and the faint spark of understanding that you are not alone in your suffering. Sleep offers little reprieve. Nightmares invade the darkness, blending past traumas with present fears. You awaken trembling, heart pounding, the shadows of the barracks closing in. Over time, exhaustion dulls these dreams, but the psychological strain accumulates like a weight that presses deeper with each passing day. You witness men breaking under this pressure, some retreating into silence and apathy, others spiraling into despair or madness. The camp does not just punish the body, it systematically erodes the mind, stripping away the sense of self and hope. The most dangerous enemy here is not the frost or the whip, but the slow unravelling of identity and will. Yet, even in this bleak psychological landscape, fragments of resistance endure. Small acts of kindness, a shared blanket, a whispered word of encouragement pierce the darkness. Memories recited quietly, songs hummed beneath breath, stories told softly by the fire. These fragile threads help keep the mind tethered to something beyond survival. You come to understand that endurance here requires not only physical resilience, but a mental fortress, however fragile. Holding on to a sense of purpose, no matter how faint, becomes a subtle act of rebellion, a way to claim back a piece of humanity amid the relentless dehumanization. The psychological weight of the camp is a shadow that follows you beyond the physical pain, a deep undercurrent shaping every thought and feeling. It is a test of spirit as much as body, a silent battle waged in the darkest corners of the mind, where hope flickers and sometimes refuses to die. In the frozen silence of the camp, where hope often feels like a distant, unreachable light, religion and belief take on a quiet but powerful role among the prisoners. Though open worship is forbidden and often punished harshly, many find in faith a fragile sanctuary from the relentless oppression, a hidden source of strength that transcends the brutal reality surrounding them. You notice that small secret gatherings occur in the darkest corners of the barracks, or in whispered conversations during fleeting moments of rest. Men and women speak softly of prayers, sacred texts memorized and passed by word of mouth, fragments of hymns hummed low enough to avoid detection. The rituals are stripped to their barest essentials, distilled into moments of quiet meditation or shared silence. For some, faith becomes a lifeline, a way to make sense of the suffering inflicted upon them, a promise of something beyond this life's cruelty. It offers a framework to endure pain and humiliation, a belief that their torment is not meaningless, but part of a larger, incomprehensible plan. In this way, religion provides a rare space where dignity and identity can survive. You hear stories of prisoners who cling to their faith, even after witnessing unspeakable horrors. They recite psalms or verses from memory, sometimes teaching others who have forgotten, preserving a cultural and spiritual heritage that the camp tries to erase. These moments of quiet worship are acts of defiance, affirming the prisoner's humanity in the face of a system designed to strip it away. Yet faith in the camp is complicated. Some prisoners wrestle with anger or doubt, questioning why such suffering is allowed to continue. The brutal conditions test belief, shaking even the strongest convictions. You see how some surrender to despair, rejecting religion as an illusion, while others hold tighter, finding in it the last refuge of hope. The guards and camp authorities view religion with suspicion and hostility, often cracking down on gatherings or punishing those caught praying or possessing religious texts. This repression only deepens the secretive nature of faith within the camp, forcing believers to hide their practices beneath layers of silence and fear. Despite the dangers, the presence of faith weaves a subtle thread of resilience through the camp's harshness. It connects prisoners across ethnicities, backgrounds and ideologies, reminding them of shared humanity beyond the camp's dividing lines. In the flickering shadows of suffering, belief becomes a quiet rebellion, a way to preserve the self when everything else is taken. You realize that in this place of frozen despair, faith is not always loud or overt, but it is profoundly present. It shapes how prisoners endure, how they find meaning amid senseless cruelty, and how, even in the darkest nights, A flicker of light can survive, hidden but unextinguished. Amid the brutal labour and starvation, another silent enemy lurks within the camp: illness. The medical barracks, or rather the place designated as such, stands as a grim testament to the desperation of survival here. It is less a place of healing and more a holding pen for the sick and dying, where hope comes in fleeting, fragile moments. You soon learn that the medical facilities are woefully inadequate. There are few supplies, almost no proper medicine, and doctors or medics who work under immense pressure, often themselves prisoners pushed to the limits of their endurance. They struggle against disease and injury with limited tools, attempting to mend bodies that are already ravaged by exhaustion, cold and hunger. Disease spreads swiftly through the overcrowded barracks. Typhus, dysentery, pneumonia, tuberculosis. The cramped, unsanitary conditions are breeding grounds for infection, and the camp's freezing temperatures do little to stop the advancing illnesses. Many prisoners collapse with fevers that burn through their fragile bodies, coughing blood, their breaths shallow and rapid. You witness the cruel calculus of survival in the medical barracks. Those deemed too sick to work are sent here, but the line between life and death is razor thin. Some receive basic care, broth, rest, a scarce dose of medicine, while others are left to wither away, forgotten in cold, dark corners. The camp's brutal efficiency means that those who cannot return to labour are often quietly left to die. The fear of illness is constant. The mere symptoms of a cough or a fever can provoke panic, not only because of the physical suffering, but also because being labelled sick can mean isolation, starvation or abandonment. You notice how prisoners hide their symptoms, trying to appear stronger than they feel, knowing that survival often depends on appearing fit enough to work. In the medical barracks, the faces of the sick are gaunt and hollow, eyes sunken but still holding on to a glimmer of something: fear, hope, or perhaps resignation. The moans and coughs echo faintly through the thin walls, a haunting soundtrack to the camp's unyielding cruelty. You see acts of quiet compassion, prisoners sharing what little warmth or food they have, holding hands through the long nights, whispering words of comfort. These moments of humanity flicker like fragile flames in the darkness, a small rebellion against the inevitable. The medical barracks reveal the full scope of the camp's devastation, not only a physical prison, but a place where bodies break down under relentless pressure, and the line between life and death is crossed daily, quietly, and without ceremony. It is here that you fully grasp the fragility of survival in the Gulag, where even the most basic acts of care are acts of defiance against the engulfing cold of oblivion. As the cold days drag into endless months, the relentless harshness of the Gulag begins to wear down not only your body, but the fragile threads of your mind. The crushing monotony, the ceaseless fear, the ever-present hunger, and the unbearable cold combine to create a psychological pressure unlike any other. This mental strain slowly gnaws at your will, threatening to collapse your spirit from within. You notice how even the strongest men around you become withdrawn, their faces hollowed by exhaustion and worry. Conversations grow fewer, eyes lose their spark, and laughter vanishes altogether. Many prisoners retreat into themselves, speaking less and less, as if words carry too much risk in a place where trust is fragile and danger lurks in every shadow. Despair becomes an unspoken presence. It drifts like a fog through the barracks, settling over the men like a heavy blanket, muffling hope and softening resistance. You see the signs in the silent men who no longer rise for roll call, in the prisoners who walk listlessly, their shoulders bowed beneath invisible burdens, and in the quiet sobs that sometimes escape in the dead of night. Sleep, when it comes, offers little relief. Nightmares weave through the darkness, memories of violence, the faces of lost comrades, the spectre of death hovering near. You wake, trembling, heart pounding, trapped between the world of dreams and the brutal reality that awaits outside the barracks. Some prisoners fight back against despair by clinging to small routines, reciting memorized poems or prayers, sharing whispered stories of home, or quietly humming a song. These acts become lifelines, fragile connections to a life beyond the camp walls, and a testament to the endurance of the human spirit. Yet, the mental toll is devastating. You witness men succumbing to madness, talking to themselves, wandering aimlessly, or slipping into muteness. Suicide, though rare and perilous, becomes an escape some consider when the unbearable weight of existence crushes all hope. The guards show little mercy to those breaking down. Mental illness is met with suspicion or cruelty, not compassion. The camp's machinery grinds on relentlessly, indifferent to the inner battles waged behind hollow eyes. Through it all, You realize that survival here demands more than physical endurance. It requires a fortress of mental resilience, one constantly under siege. The psychological warfare of the Gulag is a quiet, invisible battle fought in the shadows, shaping the lives and deaths of countless prisoners. In the grip of despair, every small spark of hope, whether a kind word, a shared meal, or a remembered song, becomes precious. A fragile ember, resisting the overwhelming darkness. It is this delicate balance between despair and hope that defines existence in the camp, a silent struggle as relentless as the cold itself. In the unforgiving world of the Gulag, discipline is maintained through brutal and arbitrary punishments, designed not only to enforce order, but to instill terror. The camp authorities wield this power ruthlessly, using punishment as a tool to crush any flicker of resistance or defiance. You quickly learn that the slightest misstep, real or imagined, can lead to severe consequences. Punishments range from hours of exhausting forced labor beyond the usual quotas to beatings so violent that prisoners are left bruised, bleeding and broken. The guards take pleasure in exerting their power, their shouts echoing across the barracks and work sites, reinforcing the fragile hierarchy that keeps the camp functioning. You witness the use of the Strafbat, or penal battalion, a brutal form of punishment where prisoners are sent to perform the most dangerous and back-breaking tasks, with almost no food or rest. This is a slow death sentence in itself, a way for the camp to dispose of those deemed troublesome without the formality of execution. Solitary confinement, or carcer, is another dreaded punishment. A prisoner placed in a cramped, dark cell with minimal clothing and little food faces a harsh psychological ordeal. Days stretch into weeks in oppressive silence and cold, with only the echoes of the camp outside. Many emerge from carcer mentally shattered or physically weakened. Public punishments serve as grim warnings. A prisoner might be tied to a post and whipped, or forced to stand at attention in freezing weather for hours, their body trembling uncontrollably. These displays of cruelty are meant to break spirits and discourage any thoughts of rebellion. You realize that the arbitrary nature of punishment is perhaps the most terrifying aspect. Innocent mistakes or rumors can trigger a harsh penalty. The guards often act with capricious cruelty, their moods dictating who suffers next. This unpredictability ensures constant fear, keeping prisoners compliant and cautious. Despite the terror, some prisoners try to maintain dignity in the face of punishment. They endure silently, refusing to give the guards the satisfaction of a cry or complaint. These small acts of defiance, though perilous, become symbols of resilience amid relentless oppression. The brutal discipline enforces a regime where survival is not just about physical endurance, but mastering fear itself. You learn to navigate this dangerous landscape carefully, knowing that each day lived without punishment is a small victory in a place designed to break all resistance. The ever-present threat of punishment shapes every action, every word, and every glance within the camp, a constant reminder that freedom here is not only lost, but violently suppressed by those who hold power. The labour imposed upon you in the Gulag is relentless and seemingly without purpose beyond punishment and exhaustion. Day after day, you and the other prisoners are driven to complete quotas that stretch beyond human capability, often in tasks that appear pointless or wasteful to any observer. This forced labour is not about productivity or achievement. It is a mechanism of control and destruction. You find yourself cutting timber in endless forests, dragging heavy logs over frozen ground, your muscles screaming against the cold and fatigue. Other days you haul stones for road construction, only to see the work undone by frost or flood, as if the camp's brutal efforts exist only to consume lives, rather than build anything lasting. In the mines you shovel coal in suffocating darkness, your lungs filling with black dust that you know will never stop corroding your breath. The work is so grueling and unending that the mind begins to dissociate from the body, treating each motion as a mere mechanical repetition to survive another moment. The inefficiency of the labour is striking. Orders come from faceless officials far removed from the camp, demanding quotas that ignore seasonal realities or basic human limits. If you fail, punishment is swift and severe, yet even when quotas are met, the work rarely benefits anyone but the Soviet state's oppressive machinery. You observe how the camp system values output over people. treating prisoners as disposable cogs in an endless cycle of toil and degradation. The sheer physical exertion, combined with insufficient nutrition, means many never recover from one day to the next, their bodies gradually giving way to exhaustion and injury. Amid the forced labour, camaraderie emerges as a vital lifeline. Prisoners share techniques to ease the burden, offer silent encouragement, and sometimes secretly trade tools or small food portions. These bonds, forged in hardship, become a quiet form of resistance, a way to reclaim dignity in a system designed to erase it. Yet the futility of the work gnaws at you. Each day's efforts seem to vanish into the void, buildings crumble, roads wash away, and the forests slowly retreat under the weight of endless cutting. It becomes clear that the Gulag's true purpose is not productivity, but punishment and control, with forced labour as its brutal instrument. This understanding deepens the sense of despair, but also sharpens the resolve to survive. You realise that endurance in the camp means enduring not only the physical demands, but also the crushing meaninglessness imposed by the system. Survival becomes a test of will against a machine that devours hope along with flesh and bone. In the oppressive atmosphere of the Gulag, where trust is a rare and precious commodity, the relationships that form between prisoners become vital for survival, both physically and emotionally. You quickly learn that despite the camp's efforts to isolate and dehumanize, human connection persists, often in subtle and fragile ways. At first, interactions are cautious, marked by suspicion born of necessity. Everyone is aware that informants may lurk among them, and alliances can bring both protection and peril. Yet over time, bonds form between those who share a work detail, those who manage to trade scraps of food, or those who simply offer a kind word or gesture. You notice how small acts of solidarity, sharing a piece of bread, covering a fellow prisoner with an extra threadbare blanket, whispering words of comfort during the bitter cold nights, become lifelines amid the relentless hardship. These gestures, though modest, carry enormous weight, a silent declaration of shared humanity in a place designed to strip it away. Friendships emerge with a fragile intensity, often forged in moments of shared struggle or quiet rebellion. Prisoners exchange stories of their lives before the camp, hopes for the future, or memories of loved ones, creating small islands of identity and meaning amid the vast sea of suffering. Romantic relationships, though rare and complicated by the brutal conditions, also arise. They offer a fleeting glimpse of tenderness and normalcy, a momentary escape from the crushing reality. Yet these connections are always shadowed by fear. The fear of betrayal, punishment, or separation. Conversely, tension and conflict are inevitable in such a harsh environment. Competition for scarce resources, the stress of constant surveillance, and the psychological toll of the camp sometimes ignite violence or resentment. You witness fights breaking out, sometimes over food, sometimes as a result of long-simmering frustrations. Such incidents are quickly punished, reinforcing the fragile balance prisoners must maintain. You come to understand that these relationships are as complex as life itself, marked by trust and betrayal, kindness and cruelty, hope and despair. They are not merely survival strategies, but affirmations that even in the darkest circumstances, people crave connection and belonging. This intricate web of human interaction shapes daily life in the camp. It reminds you that beneath the layers of suffering and brutality, there is still a pulse of life, a stubborn refusal to be wholly broken. The bonds between prisoners, fragile and fleeting as they may be, become one of the few sources of resilience and meaning in a world designed to erase both. Within the shadowed confines of the Gulag, an invisible but potent force permeates daily life. The presence of informants and the culture of fear they cultivate. You quickly realize that survival here requires more than endurance against cold or hunger. It demands navigating a treacherous web of suspicion, where trust can be a deadly gamble. The camp authorities rely heavily on prisoners to police one another, recruiting informants who report on their comrades' words and actions. These informants, often called Stuki in the prisoners' language, hold a precarious position. Some are coerced into betrayal through threats or promises of better treatment, while others volunteer in a bid for power or survival. You observe how paranoia seeps into every interaction. Prisoners lower their voices, hesitate before speaking, and avoid sharing thoughts that might be deemed subversive. Friendships are tested by doubt, and even casual remarks risk becoming evidence in the eyes of the guards. The presence of informants fractures the prisoner community. Genuine solidarity is shadowed by the fear that a whispered conversation might be overheard, a glance misinterpreted. This atmosphere stifles rebellion and dissent as the threat of denunciation is constant and unpredictable. At times you witness the devastating consequences of betrayal. A single accusation can lead to brutal interrogations, solitary confinement, or transfer to harsher camps. The accused may disappear without explanation, swallowed by the vast prison system. Such disappearances breed a collective anxiety, a reminder that no one is truly safe. Yet, within this oppressive environment, prisoners develop subtle codes of communication. Gestures, glances, and half-spoken phrases that convey meaning without alerting informants. These small acts become vital tools of resistance, allowing pockets of trust and solidarity to survive beneath the surface. You come to understand that the culture of fear cultivated by informants is a powerful mechanism of control. It isolates prisoners, breaking down communal bonds, and reinforcing the guard's authority without constant physical violence. This psychological domination is as damaging as the physical hardships endured. Despite this, moments of courage and loyalty emerge. Some prisoners risk severe punishment to protect others, to deny the informant's power, or to maintain a sense of integrity. These acts, though dangerous and rare, shine like fragile sparks in the pervasive darkness. Navigating the complex and often perilous social landscape of the Gulag becomes a daily challenge. You learn to weigh every word and action carefully, understanding that in this place, survival is as much about managing fear and suspicion as it is about enduring the cold or the labour. The invisible chains of mistrust bind the camp as tightly as the barbed wire fences surrounding it. Each day brings a new wave of prisoners arriving at the camp, their faces pale and eyes wide with the shock of their sudden captivity. You watch as fresh arrivals are herded off the transport trains, often cattle cars that have carried them for days without food, water, or warmth, stepping onto the snowy ground as strangers to this harsh new world. The newcomers' first moments in the camp are filled with confusion and fear. They are stripped of their possessions, clothes, and identity, given thin, ill-fitting uniforms that do little to protect against the cold. They are thrust into an alien routine of roll calls, inspections, and forced labour before their bodies have a chance to adjust. You notice how some arrive in shock, barely able to comprehend the reality around them, while others quickly harden, instinctively adopting the hardened demeanour necessary to survive. The older prisoners often watch the new arrivals with a mixture of sympathy and wary caution, knowing too well the brutal lessons the camp will teach. Orientation is brutal and impersonal. Guards bark orders, and the new prisoners learn quickly that any hesitation or weakness invites punishment. The camp's environment is unforgiving, and newcomers are often assigned the most dangerous or exhausting work details as a test of their endurance. You witness how the arrival of new prisoners affects the camp's delicate social balance. Sometimes fresh faces bring hope, stories from the outside, or small morale boosts. Other times they disrupt fragile alliances or provoke tensions, especially if they come from different regions or social backgrounds. The psychological toll on new prisoners is immense. Many break down in tears, overwhelmed by cold, hunger and fear. Some resolve to resist, but the harsh reality of the Gulag soon tempers such impulses. Others sink into despair, their spirits crushed before they even understand what survival will demand. You realise that the arrival of new prisoners is a grim reminder of the vast machinery of repression that fuels the camp. Each new face represents a life uprooted, a story interrupted, and a future stolen. Watching them, you understand that the Gulag is not only a place of suffering, but a relentless conveyor belt of human tragedy, churning on without pause. Through the eyes of the newcomers, you see the full, raw horror of the camp, an unending cycle of shock, adaptation, and for some, eventual resignation to the brutal reality that dominates every moment of existence here. As time stretches on, a distant and fragile hope flickers, the possibility of release. You hear whispers among prisoners about amnesties, sentence reductions, or transfers back to civilian life. Yet this hope is tempered by harsh realities and often cruel disappointments. Release from the Gulag is rare and unpredictable. Some prisoners serve their full sentences, emerging gaunt and broken, struggling to rejoin a society that has often forgotten or shunned them. Others fall victim to bureaucratic delays, lost paperwork, or arbitrary extensions. You come to see that freedom here is not guaranteed by the passage of time, but is a prize arbitrated by a distant, indifferent system. The anticipation of release brings complex emotions. It can lift spirits, fueling endurance through the bleakest days. Yet it can also deepen despair when promises go unfulfilled, or when news of others' freedom only highlights one's own continuing imprisonment. You observe how some prisoners cling to routines and small goals as ways to maintain hope, counting days, memorizing poems, or imagining life beyond the camp gates. These mental refuges become crucial, preserving a sense of identity and purpose against the dehumanizing forces around them. At the same time, the thought of release is daunting. Many fear what awaits outside, the stigma of being an ex-prisoner, the loss of family or community, and the challenges of rebuilding a life from the ruins left by years of suffering. The camp, harsh as it is, has become a strange sort of home. In these moments you understand that the Gulag is not only a place of physical imprisonment, but also a liminal space where the boundaries between captivity and freedom blur. Hope becomes both a beacon and a burden, a source of strength and vulnerability. Ultimately, the fragile hope of release underscores the complex human experience within the Gulag, a testament to the resilience of the spirit and the enduring struggle for dignity amid unimaginable cruelty. It is this hope, faint and flickering, that sustains countless lives through the cold, dark nights, reminding you that even in the harshest places, the desire for freedom and meaning persists. Thank you for following this story through its many parts. The history we've explored is heavy and difficult, yet it reminds us of the resilience and fragility of the human spirit under unimaginable conditions. I hope this journey has given you a deeper understanding of that harsh reality. Take care of yourself as you carry this knowledge forward. Sleep well, and may your dreams bring you peace and rest.